You think mountain families just ate turkey like everyone else? Think again. Appalachian hollows created Christmas feasts from what the land provided. Here are 30 forgotten hillbilly Christmas dinners that kept families fed through the coldest Decembers. Wild rabbit in brown gravy was the Christmas centerpiece mountain families harvested from snowy hillsides. These were wild cottontails tracked through December snow, caught in box traps or shot cleanly. The rabbits were skinned carefully, jointed, and browned slowly in pork fat until golden. They simmered for hours with wild onions and black pepper until meat fell off the bone. The cooking liquid became rich gravy thickened with flour. Families served this over biscuits or alongside stored potatoes. In eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, wild rabbit meant Christmas protein that cost nothing, just skill and land knowledge. Children learned holiday meals came from work, not stores. The meat was tender and mild, each piece representing winter mornings spent hunting. This represented self-reliance and connection between mountain people and their environment, proving Christmas abundance didn't require money when you had resourcefulness passed through generations. Possum roasted with sweet potatoes was Christmas dinner that filled mountain families with pride. These weren't desperate meals, but traditional feasts prepared with care. The possums were caught in late fall after feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving meat surprisingly sweet flavor. The cleaning was meticulous, with possums scrubbed thoroughly and parboiled to remove wild taste. Then they were stuffed with sweet potatoes, onions, and herbs before slow roasting in Dutch ovens. The sweet potatoes absorbed rich juices while skin turned crispy golden. In North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia hollows, Possum Christmas meant honoring traditions stretching back generations. Grandmothers taught daughters proper preparation, passing knowledge connecting families to ancestors. The meat was tender and slightly sweet. Served with cornbread and greens, this was mountain fine dining representing cultural identity stronger than judgment. Fried squirrel with milk gravy turned small game into Christmas celebration, tasting like hickory nuts and mountain tradition. December, squirrels were fat from fall acorns, their meat firm and flavorful. Young boys went hunting Christmas Eve morning, fathers teaching them to shoot cleanly. The squirrels were cleaned, cut into pieces, then soaked overnight in salt water. On Christmas morning, they were dredged in seasoned flour and fried in hot lard until golden crispy. Pan drippings became milk gravy, flour stirred into hot fat, then milk added slowly until thickened creamy. Families served this over fresh-baked biscuits. In Appalachian communities, Squirrel Christmas meant teaching children to hunt, to provide. Understanding food came from work. The meat was tender and slightly nutty, each piece representing hours in cold December woods. Mothers fried batch after batch, keeping platters warm. This wasn't poverty food, but tradition connecting tables to land itself. Whole hog shoulder with crackling bread was Christmas feast requiring community effort, turning December butchering into celebration. Mountain families raised hogs specifically for Christmas slaughter, feeding them all year. The shoulder was large enough to feed extended family, fatty enough to stay moist during long cooking. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, then slow roasted over hickory coals in outdoor pits men tended throughout Christmas Eve night. Fat rendered slowly, creating crispy bark outside while inside stayed tender. Women saved cracklings, crispy rendered pork fat bits, to mix into cornbread batter. The crackling bread baked in cast iron skillets, top golden and crunchy. In rural Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi, this meant Christmas smelling like wood smoke for miles. Families gathered around outdoor fires, sharing whiskey and stories while meat cooked through cold night. The finished shoulder pulled apart easily, juice running into crackling bread. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Stack cake with dried apple filling was Christmas dessert requiring community cooperation and weeks of preparation. This wasn't ordinary cake, but thin layers stacked with dried apple filling, creating towering centerpiece feeding dozens. Women began drying apples in late summer, slicing thin and laying on screens until leathery. Come Christmas, apples were rehydrated and cooked with molasses and cinnamon until thick. The cake layers were simple: flour, lard, molasses, spices, rolled thin and baked separately. Assembly was ceremony, each layer placed and spread with apple mixture. The cake sat for days, letting flavors meld into something slicing clean and tasting like autumn. In mountain communities, stack cake represented cooperation because neighbors often brought layers to celebrations. The finished cake stood tall, dark layers visible through golden apple filling. This represented mountain Christmas, patient, cooperative, deeply satisfying. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor, unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Pickled pig's feet were Christmas delicacy, transforming butchering scraps into something prized. When families butchered hogs in December, nothing was wasted, especially feet becoming treats after preparation. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled tender with bay leaves and peppercorns, then packed into stone crocks and covered with spiced vinegar heated with garlic and pepper. They cured for weeks, vinegar penetrating meat and softening cartilage until everything became tender and tangy. Served cold on Christmas morning, pickled feet were eaten with fingers, meat falling off bones while gelatinous texture melted on tongues. In rural communities throughout the South, these represented thrift elevated to tradition, using every part of hog and creating something delicious. Children learned to appreciate pickled feet as treats, not scraps. The vinegary tang cut through rich holiday meals. This proved mountain cooking was about transforming everything into something worth celebrating. Leather britches with fatback brought summer's green beans to Christmas through ancient preservation. These weren't canned beans, but fresh beans strung on thread in late summer and hung from rafters. By Christmas, they hung brown, rattling when touched. The beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with fatback until tender. The result tasted like concentrated summer with smoky richness. In Appalachian homes, leather britches represented connection between seasons, August abundance preserved for December. Grandmothers taught granddaughters proper stringing, threading beans carefully for drying. The beans hung all fall, visible reminders of summer work feeding Christmas tables. Cooked long, they became tender with chewy texture unlike fresh beans. The pot liquor was rich, sopped with cornbread. This represented mountain resourcefulness, preserving without equipment, feeding families through winter using thread and time. Blackberry jam cake was Christmas dessert, carrying summer's wild harvest into winter celebration. This wasn't ordinary cake, but dense creation, darkened with blackberry jam stirred into batter. The jam came from wild berries picked along fence rows in July, cooked with sugar and preserved. Come Christmas, jam transformed into cake moisture and flavor, tart, sweet, purple. The batter was spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, creating warmth, complementing berry brightness. Baked in cast iron, the cake emerged dark and fragrant, its crumb tight from jam. Some families added caramel icing, others served plain. In mountain communities, blackberry jam cake represented foresight and connection to land, picking berries in summer for Christmas months away. Children remembered helping pick berries, fingers stained purple. Understanding this work would become December dessert. The cake sliced thick, each piece carrying memories of summer foraging. Fried rabbit sausage with buttermilk biscuits was Christmas breakfast that turned wild game into something special enough for holiday morning. Mountain families ground rabbit meat with pork fat, sage, black pepper, and salt, forming patties that fried crispy in cast iron. The sausage was lean from rabbit but rich from pork fat, creating perfect balance. Served alongside buttermilk biscuits, split and buttered, this was breakfast that required hunting skill and butchering knowledge. In Appalachian communities, Christmas morning meant rabbit sausage sizzling while biscuits baked, filling houses with savory smells. Children woke to this aroma. Understanding Christmas began with food earned through work. The sausage was tender inside with crackling crust outside, its sage flavor marking it as celebration food. This represented mountain Christmas, wild game transformed into tradition, poverty turned into pride through skill and resourcefulness. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Wild turkey roasted with chestnut dressing was Christmas dinner that required hunting success and forest knowledge. These weren't farm turkeys, but wild birds shot in December woods, their meat darker and more flavorful than domestic fowl. The turkey was stuffed with dressing made from dried cornbread, wild chestnuts gathered in fall, sage, and onions. Roasted slowly, the bird developed crispy skin while staying moist inside, the chestnut dressing absorbing juices and becoming rich and savory. In mountain communities, wild turkey represented Christmas success. The hunter who brought one home provided real celebration. The meat was lean and slightly gamey, requiring careful cooking to stay tender. Chestnuts added sweetness and texture impossible with modern ingredients. This was Christmas earned through December mornings in cold woods, through knowing turkey habits and shooting straight. The finished bird fed extended family, its presence on the table marking genuine achievement. Pork backbone and dumplings was Christmas comfort food that transformed butchering remnants into soul-warming celebration. The backbone, cut from hogs during December slaughter, was meaty enough to flavor broth but cheap enough for everyday tables. The bones simmered for hours with onions and black pepper until meat fell away tender. Then dumplings were dropped into bubbling broth. Flour, lard, and buttermilk rolled thin and cut into strips. They puffed up while cooking, absorbing rich pork flavor and creating thickness. In rural communities throughout the South, backbone and dumplings meant Christmas thrift elevated to tradition. Families gathered around steaming pots, spooning dumplings and tender pork into bowls. This wasn't fancy food, but it was deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed you from inside while snow fell outside. The dumplings were tender and rich, the pork sweet and falling apart soft. This represented mountain Christmas, making celebration from what you had, turning necessity into tradition passed through generations. Persimmon pudding with hard sauce was Christmas dessert that captured wild sweetness of mountain autumn. Persimmons had to be gathered after first frost when they became soft and intensely sweet, their astringency gone. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp mixed with flour, eggs, milk, spices, and molasses. Baked slowly, the pudding emerged dark and dense, its texture somewhere between cake and custard. Hard sauce, butter and sugar beaten until fluffy, flavored with vanilla or whiskey, melted over warm pudding, creating rich contrast. In mountain communities, persimmon pudding represented patience and knowledge, knowing when persimmons were ready, understanding how to preserve their flavor. The pudding was deeply spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, its persimmon sweetness unlike anything else. This was Christmas dessert that couldn't be rushed or bought, requiring understanding of seasons and willingness to wait for nature's timing. Cured venison shoulder with red-eye gravy was Christmas dinner, showing how preservation created celebration. The venison shoulder was cured in salt through late fall, transforming fresh meat into something that would last through winter. By Christmas, the shoulder had developed concentrated flavor, salty, slightly funky, intensely meaty. It was soaked to remove excess salt, then slow roasted until tender. The pan drippings were deglazed with strong black coffee, creating red-eye gravy, dark, slightly bitter, deeply savory. In mountain communities, cured venison meant Christmas protein that cost nothing but hunting skill and preservation knowledge. The meat was lean and dense, each slice packed with flavor that fresh venison couldn't match. Served with biscuits and greens, this was mountain fine dining earned through November hunts and December patience. The red-eye gravy cut through richness while adding complexity, proving simple techniques created profound results. Fried apple pies with sorghum were Christmas dessert that children waited for all year. Dried apples from summer harvest were rehydrated and cooked down with sorghum syrup, cinnamon, and nutmeg until thick and jammy. The filling was enclosed in circles of biscuit dough, crimped shut, and fried in hot lard until golden and crackling. The result was handheld Christmas joy. Crispy outside, molten apple inside, sweet and spiced. In rural communities, fried apple pies meant celebration accessible to poorest families, since dried apples cost nothing but summer work. Children received these as special treats, burning their mouths on hot filling while snow fell outside. The pies were portable, lasting days without refrigeration, making them perfect for holiday visiting. Each bite delivered concentrated apple sweetness balanced by pastry crunch, proving that simplest ingredients could create genuine luxury when prepared with care and love passed through generations. Souse meat with crackers was Christmas appetizer that transformed pork scraps into delicacy through careful preparation. The souse was made from pig heads, feet, and ears boiled until tender, then chopped fine and bound with gelatin from bones. Vinegar, onions, and spices were added before pressing mixture into loaf pans to set. By Christmas, the souse sliced clean, its texture firm and slightly gelatinous, its flavor tangy and rich. Served cold with saltine crackers, this was Christmas snacking that represented complete hog utilization. In mountain communities, souse meant respect for animals and refusal to waste anything. The vinegar preserved meat while adding brightness that cut through richness. Children learned to appreciate souse as grown-up food, its complex flavors marking passage into adult tastes. This was Christmas tradition born from necessity, proving that the finest cooking often came from using everything and wasting nothing. Baked sweet potatoes with butter and cinnamon were Christmas side that elevated garden staples into celebration. The sweet potatoes were stored in root cellars from fall harvest, their starches converting to sugars through winter. By Christmas, they were intensely sweet and ready for baking. Roasted whole until soft and caramelized, the potatoes were split and topped with butter and cinnamon, creating simple perfection. In rural communities, sweet potatoes represented food security. Easy to grow, simple to store, delicious when prepared well. Christmas meant breaking out the biggest, best potatoes saved specifically for celebration. The flesh was orange and creamy, naturally sweet without added sugar. Children loved sweet potatoes because they tasted like dessert, despite being dinner. This represented mountain Christmas philosophy, taking what grew easily and treating it with enough respect to make it special, proving celebration didn't require expensive ingredients when you had good land and patient hands. Rabbit gravy over rice was Christmas dinner that stretched small game into meal feeding many. The rabbits were jointed and browned, then simmered until tender in broth thickened with flour into rich gravy. Served over white rice, this created complete meal that was economical and deeply satisfying. In mountain communities, rabbit gravy represented resourcefulness, turning 2 or 3 small rabbits into dinner for 10 or more people. The gravy was savory and rich, flavored with wild onions and black pepper. Rice stretched the meal further, soaking up every drop of gravy while providing filling carbohydrates. This was Christmas dinner born from necessity but elevated through care and proper technique. The rabbit meat was tender and mild, the gravy thick and comforting. Families gathered around steaming bowls, understanding that celebration came from making the most of what you had, transforming scarcity into sufficiency through skill and tradition passed through generations of mountain cooks. Chestnut soup with bacon was Christmas' first course that captured forest bounty and smokehouse richness. Wild chestnuts gathered in fall were roasted, peeled, and simmered until soft enough to puree. The resulting soup was thickened with cream when available, or milk when not, creating velvety texture. Crispy bacon crumbled on top added saltiness and crunch that complemented chestnut sweetness. In Appalachian communities, chestnut soup represented Christmas before the blight destroyed American chestnuts, marking this as truly forgotten food. The soup was elegant despite humble ingredients, its nutty sweetness unlike anything modern. Served hot in bowls, it warmed bodies preparing for larger Christmas meal to follow. The bacon provided savory contrast while adding necessary fat. This was mountain sophistication, wild food prepared with technique that created restaurant-quality results, proving rural cooks understood refinement even when cooking from forest and farm. Dried corn pudding was Christmas side that transformed summer's abundance into winter celebration. Field corn was dried on the cob in late summer, then cut off and stored in jars. Come Christmas, the dried corn was ground coarsely and simmered in milk with butter, sugar, and eggs until it became thick custard. The result was sweet and creamy with toothsome texture from corn pieces. In rural communities, dried corn pudding represented foresight, preserving August plenty for December scarcity. The pudding was comfort food that tasted like summer sunshine captured and held through winter darkness. Served warm, it accompanied ham or turkey perfectly, its sweetness balancing savory main dishes. This proved mountain cooks understood food preservation and flavor balance, creating dishes that honored both seasons and made winter celebrations possible through summer work and planning passed through generations. Wild greens mess with ham hock was Christmas side that brought spring preservation to winter table. In spring, mountain families gathered wild greens, poke, lamb's quarters, dandelion, and canned them for winter. By Christmas, these jars represented summer work and wild food knowledge. The greens were cooked long and slow with smoked ham hock until tender and richly flavored. The pot liquor was savory and nourishing, meant to be sopped up with cornbread. In Appalachian communities, wild greens meant Christmas connection to land and seasons, proving celebration included foods gathered free from hillsides. The greens were slightly bitter, balanced by ham's saltiness and smokiness. This was nutrition and tradition combined, teaching children that Christmas abundance came from knowing land and being willing to work hard, preserving what nature provided freely to those with knowledge and respect. Molasses taffy pull was Christmas entertainment and dessert combined into one sticky, sweet tradition. Molasses was boiled with sugar until it reached hard ball stage, then poured onto buttered platters to cool slightly. Families gathered with buttered hands, pulling the taffy until it turned from dark brown to golden and became firm. The pulling was a social event, children and adults working together, laughing as the candy stretched and folded. The finished taffy was cut into pieces and wrapped, becoming Christmas treats that lasted through winter. In rural communities, Taffy pull meant Christmas fun that cost almost nothing but created memories lasting lifetimes. The candy was chewy and intensely sweet, its molasses flavor marking it as mountain treat. This represented Christmas joy created through community effort, proving best celebrations came from working and laughing together, transforming simple ingredients into sweetness through shared labor and tradition. Fried catfish with hush puppies was Christmas Eve tradition in communities near rivers and creeks. The catfish were caught through holes in December ice or from cold but unfrozen streams, their white flesh firm and sweet. Coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried until golden, the fish developed crackling crust while staying moist inside. Hush puppies, cornmeal fritters mixed with onions, fried alongside, creating complete meal. In rural communities along southern waterways, catfish Christmas Eve meant abundant local protein requiring only skill and patience to catch. The tradition often included whole community fish fries where neighbors gathered. The catfish was mild and flaky, the hush puppies crispy and slightly sweet. Served with coleslaw and hot sauce, this was Christmas celebration built on what rivers provided freely, proving holiday feasts didn't require expensive ingredients when you had knowledge, skill, and waters full of fish waiting for those patient enough to catch them. Boiled custard was Christmas drink that replaced expensive eggnog in mountain households. This wasn't thick custard, but pourable drink made from milk, eggs, and sugar cooked gently until it thickened slightly. Flavored with vanilla or nutmeg, it was served cold in glasses throughout Christmas Day. In rural communities, boiled custard represented accessible luxury, creating something special from everyday ingredients. The drink was sweet and creamy, coating the tongue with richness. Children loved it because it tasted like melted ice cream, while adults appreciated its elegance. Made in large batches, boiled custard lasted through Christmas week, becoming a daily reminder of celebration. This proved mountain families could create holiday traditions that felt luxurious despite costing almost nothing, transforming simple ingredients through technique and care into something genuinely special that rivaled any store-bought treat families might dream of. Pickled eggs with beets were Christmas appetizers that added color and tang to holiday tables. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and packed into jars with sliced beets and spiced vinegar, turning deep magenta as they pickled. By Christmas, the eggs had absorbed beet sweetness and vinegar brightness, becoming something far more interesting than plain boiled eggs. Sliced and served cold, they provided protein and visual appeal. In mountain communities, pickled eggs represented preservation skill and resourcefulness, turning abundant summer beets and everyday eggs into Christmas specialty. The eggs were firm and tangy with slight sweetness from beets. Children were fascinated by their color, adults appreciated their complex flavor. This was Christmas food that required planning and patience, proving best celebrations came from work done months earlier, transforming ordinary ingredients into something special through time, vinegar, and knowledge. Sorghum gingerbread was Christmas dessert that captured dark sweetness of mountain agriculture. Sorghum syrup, made from cane grown and processed locally, replaced expensive molasses in gingerbread recipes. The result was cake that was moist, dark, and intensely spiced with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. Baked in cast iron and served warm, it filled houses with Christmas smells that drifted through hollows. In rural communities, sorghum gingerbread meant Christmas sweetness that didn't require store-bought ingredients, since families often made their own sorghum. The cake was dense and rich, its crumb tight from sorghum's weight. Served with butter or whipped cream when available, plain when not, it satisfied sweet cravings during lean times. This represented mountain resourcefulness, creating celebration desserts from crops grown and processed locally, proving Christmas joy came from land and labor rather than stores and money. Backbone stew with root vegetables was Christmas dinner that used December butchering and fall harvest together. The pork backbones were meaty but inexpensive, perfect for slow-cooked stews. Combined with stored potatoes, turnips, carrots, and onions, they created rich, hearty meal. Simmered for hours, the bones released flavor and gelatin while vegetables softened into the broth. In mountain communities, backbone stew represented Christmas economy, using cuts others overlooked and vegetables stored from harvest. The stew was thick and satisfying, its broth rich with pork flavor. Served with cornbread, it fed large families affordably while still feeling celebratory. The meat fell off bones easily. The vegetables were tender and sweet. This was Christmas dinner that proved celebration didn't require expensive cuts when you had time, patience, and knowledge of how slow cooking transformed humble ingredients into something genuinely delicious and nourishing. Dried apple stack pie was Christmas dessert requiring year-round work and patient assembly. Unlike stack cake with filling between layers, this pie layered thin pastry with reconstituted dried apples, building height through repetition. Each layer was seasoned with cinnamon and sugar before the next went on. Baked slowly, the pie emerged golden with visible apple layers throughout. In Appalachian communities, dried apple stack pie represented Christmas tradition connecting summer work to winter celebration. The apples had to be dried in August, stored properly through fall, then carefully rehydrated for Christmas baking. The result was concentrated apple flavor in every bite, proof that patience created the best results. This was mountain Christmas at its finest, taking what summer provided, preserving it through fall, and transforming it into winter celebration that tasted like all three seasons, combined into one magnificent pie feeding dozens and creating memories lasting lifetimes. Molasses glazed ham scraps were the second act for leftovers that never went to waste, a way of turning thrift into pure delight. Bits of ham saved from Sunday dinner were brushed with thick, dark molasses and crisped in a skillet until their edges sizzled and caramelized. The glaze turned ordinary scraps glossy and rich, sweet meeting salt in a perfect mountain harmony. It might have been a meal made from leftovers, but it smelled like something meant for celebration. Served with hot biscuits, wilted greens, or mashed taters, it was enough to make a small kitchen feel abundant again. Folks in the hills did not waste a thing. They reused every bite, every drop, and every ounce of effort. The sound of that sizzling pan was music to anyone who worked for their food. Each piece of glazed ham carried more than flavor. It carried gratitude. The molasses softened the salty edges, creating a sticky sweetness that felt like kindness on a plate. It was living proof that a meal could be poor in ingredients yet rich in spirit. In every bite was a memory of hard work turned to reward, and no one ever left hungry. Trapper's pemmican was the ultimate trail ration, dense and enduring, a food designed to keep travelers alive across endless miles of rough terrain. Hunters dried lean strips of game meat in open air or smokehouses until every trace of moisture vanished, then pounded them with stones into a fine powder. Dried berries such as chokecherries were crushed and mixed with the meat before hot rendered fat bound it all into a solid mass. Packed into rawhide bags, pemmican could last for months without spoiling, providing a powerful balance of protein and energy that fueled trappers through snowstorms and long hunts. Small pieces were eaten as is, while larger chunks could be boiled with water to create a quick stew on frigid nights. It required no fire, no cooking, only careful preparation and respect for survival knowledge passed from indigenous peoples to the mountain men who adopted it. Few modern snacks carry such history or concentrated strength, a reminder that the simplest ingredients once meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. Hog's head cheese was a dish that made full use of an animal, born from nose-to-tail traditions where nothing could be wasted. Despite its name, it contained no cheese at all, but was instead a cold cut made by boiling the head of a pig with spices, onions, and vinegar until the meat and gelatin formed a solid loaf. Once chilled, it was sliced and served cold, often with crackers or bread. For rural Southerners, Hog's head cheese was practical, economical, and surprisingly flavorful. It reflected a time when families valued every scrap and could not afford to throw anything away. Children might have balked at the idea, but many adults treasured its rich taste. Hog's head cheese was also sold in local butcher shops and became a staple of working-class lunches. Today, it is rare to find outside specialty stores or heritage festivals, its strong flavor and rustic origins falling out of favor. Still, it tells the story of thrift, resilience, and respect for every part of the hog. fried green tomatoes with cornmeal crust were the South's way of saying waste nothing, because even an unripe tomato could still shine. When the vines hung heavy with fruit that would not turn red in time, thrifty hands sliced them thick, dusted them in cornmeal, and dropped them into sizzling bacon grease. The kitchen came alive with that familiar pop and crackle, the sound of hunger about to be satisfied. The slices fried golden and crisp, tart inside and smoky outside, a perfect blend of garden freshness and skillet comfort. They were often served beside beans, greens, or gravy, completing a meal that cost almost nothing but tasted like plenty. Each bite carried the flavor of hard work, sunshine, and summer's patience. Mothers never measured. They just knew when the batter was right, and kids learned to flip them when the edges turned brown. Fried green tomatoes were proof that nothing in the South went to waste. Not time, not food, not love. They were simple, dependable, and unforgettable. The first bite snapped with tang. The last ended in quiet satisfaction. In every kitchen that made them, thrift became art, and every plate told the same story. Make do and make it delicious. Benne seed cookies were small, nutty treats rooted in Gullah culture, treasured for both flavor and symbolism. Made with Benne seeds, a type of sesame brought from Africa, these cookies were crisp, lightly sweet, and full of heritage. They were often baked for holidays, celebrations, or as gifts, carrying meaning beyond the plate. For generations, families passed down recipes, with each batch representing resilience and tradition. Children eagerly waited for them at special gatherings, their delicate crunch setting them apart from ordinary sweets. Unlike store-bought cookies, Benne seed cookies carried the weight of ancestry, a taste tied to identity. They showcased how African ingredients shaped Southern foodways in lasting ways. Today, they are rarely made outside of dedicated cultural circles or festivals, overshadowed by more mainstream desserts. Their absence reflects not just a shift in taste, but a loss of connection to history. Forgotten by many, Benne seed cookies remain a culinary treasure worth remembering for their story as much as their flavor. Frost grape jam thumbprint. Cookies captured the fleeting sweetness of wild grapes that only reached perfection after the first frost softened their tart skins. Grandmothers ventured into thickets to gather the small, dark clusters, then simmered them into a deep purple jam that filled kitchens with a heady autumn aroma. For the cookies, they prepared a buttery dough, pressing small wells into each round and spooning in the glossy jam before baking. As the cookies cooled, the jam set into jewel-like centers that gleamed against the golden crust. Children loved to help with the thumbprints, their tiny fingerprints leaving a family mark on every treat. These cookies often appeared at holiday gatherings when the weather turned crisp and the harvest season closed, carrying with them the taste of chilly mornings and wood smoke. Frost grape jam. Thumbprint cookies endure as a symbol of resourcefulness and celebration, a sweet way to preserve the last gifts of the wild before winter settled firmly across the southern hills. Kushaw squash casserole was the pride of the garden before boxed meals and frozen casseroles ever came along. The long green and white Kushaw squash was peeled, cubed, and boiled until tender, then baked with milk, butter, and a touch of sugar to draw out its natural sweetness. Its mild flavor made it the perfect base for stretching a meal or feeding unexpected guests. Every household had its own version. Some topped it with breadcrumbs, others poured in cream if they were feeling fancy. The smell of baked Kushaw filled the kitchen with comfort, its soft texture melting into every forkful. It was the taste of late summer, of harvests and hard work rewarded. Hill families treated it like gold because it was both filling and forgiving, growing strong even when the soil was poor. No one ever left hungry when Kushaw casserole sat on the table. It was a dish that carried the spirit of mountain thrift, simple, slow, and made from what the land gave freely. To many, it was not just supper, but a symbol of plenty earned the honest way. Pan-fried rattlesnake surprised many first-time eaters with its delicate white meat and mild flavor. Frontier hunters cleaned the snake carefully, removing the head and skin before slicing the body into manageable sections. Each piece was dredged in seasoned flour or cornmeal and fried in hot bacon fat until golden and crisp. The sizzling pan sent out a tempting aroma that challenged the bravest to take a bite. Those who did found a taste closer to chicken than they expected, firm yet tender with a faint hint of the wild desert. Sharing such a meal was a mark of courage and resourcefulness, proving that no edible creature was overlooked when supplies ran thin. Around campfires, the story of catching and cooking rattlesnake often became as memorable as the meal itself. While modern diners might hesitate, mountain men considered it a practical and surprisingly pleasant addition to their table, a testament to survival instincts and an adventurous spirit willing to turn danger into nourishment. Chess pie with vinegar was one of the South's thriftiest desserts, proving that even the poorest households could enjoy something sweet. Made from sugar, eggs, butter, and a splash of vinegar, it baked into a custard-like pie with a tangy edge. The vinegar cut the sweetness, balancing the richness of the filling and making it unique. Families loved chess pie because the ingredients were always on hand, no matter how tight the budget. It was served at Sunday dinners, holidays, and gatherings, offering comfort and familiarity. While fancier pies required fruit or nuts, chess pie was humble and practical, making it beloved across generations. Children often remembered it as the dessert of their childhood, while adults prized it for its simplicity. Today, it is less common outside of heritage cookbooks, replaced by more modern sweets. Chess pie with vinegar stands as a symbol of Depression-era resilience, turning pantry basics into something remarkable. Forgotten now, it remains a dish worth remembering for both its flavor and history. Spider pan. Apple stack delighted families with layers of skillet-fried apples built high like a rustic cake. Grandmothers sliced tart orchard apples thin and cooked them in a heavy spider pan, the old name for a cast-iron skillet with sturdy legs. Each batch was sprinkled with cane sugar and a touch of cinnamon, then carefully stacked while still hot, so the juices melded into a sticky, fragrant tower. The pan sat right on the hearth or over an open flame, filling the room with the comforting scent of caramelized fruit. Served warm, the stack could be sliced like a pie, releasing ribbons of sweet apple syrup with every cut. Children eagerly awaited their turn to watch the apples bubble and to taste the golden edges straight from the pan. Spider pan apple stack reflects the Southern love of cast-iron cooking and the ability to create a show-stopping dessert with nothing more than orchard fruit, patience, and a steady hand at the hearth. Fried salt pork with gravy was the kind of meal that stuck to your bones and made you thankful for every bite. Salt pork was cheap and cured, tough until you fried it just right in a black skillet. Once it crisped, the leftover drippings turned into gold, stirred with flour and milk to make creamy white gravy that poured like silk. It covered biscuits, potatoes, or anything else that needed saving from plainness. For mountain folks, this dish turned poverty into pleasure. It filled bellies after long days in the fields and made Sunday mornings smell like grace. Salt pork was often the only meat on the table, but with that gravy, no one minded. The taste was bold, smoky, and honest, like the people who made it. A plate of fried salt pork reminded everyone that ingenuity could feed a family when the cupboard said otherwise. It was poor man's steak with rich man's flavor. Mountain Man breakfast skillet greeted dawn with a hearty mix designed to carry workers through the toughest day. Potatoes diced small fried first in bacon grease until edges turned crisp, followed by onions, peppers, and scraps of last night's venison or elk. Finally, eggs were cracked directly into the sizzling mixture, their yolks mingling with the rich drippings to coat every bite. The aroma filled the campsite long before the sun crested the peaks, drawing even the most exhausted hunter from his blanket. This breakfast was never fancy but always reliable, offering protein, starch, and fat in perfect balance for long hikes or chopping wood. Families sitting near the fire shared the skillet straight from the pan, passing wooden forks and stories as steam curled into the morning air. Today, diners serve similar dishes, but the true mountain man version carries the unmistakable taste of open flame and fresh game, a flavor of pure endurance that cannot be recreated by any restaurant range or packaged seasoning mix. Souse meat was a dish that reflected both thrift and creativity, a cousin to hog's head cheese with its own distinct preparation. It was made from pork scraps, often feet or ears, boiled until tender and then pickled in vinegar with spices. Once cooled and pressed into a loaf, it was sliced and eaten cold with crackers or bread. Families valued it because it used parts of the animal that would otherwise go to waste, stretching limited resources into multiple meals. The tangy pickled flavor gave it a sharpness that stood out from other pork dishes, making it memorable even if not beloved by everyone. Souse meat was a common sight at butchers and small groceries, sold cheaply to working families. Children often avoided it, but older generations considered it a practical staple. Today, souse meat has nearly vanished, its strong taste and rustic image less appealing to modern palates. Still, it remains a marker of a time when nothing edible was ever discarded. Black walnut vinegar pie offered a bold finish to any meal with its intriguing mix of sharpness and deep sweetness. Grandmothers whipped eggs, sorghum syrup, and aged black walnut vinegar into a dark filling that baked into a glossy, fragrant pie. The vinegar cut through the richness, highlighting the earthy flavor of the walnuts while leaving a gentle tang on the tongue. Served slightly warm, the pie balanced sweet and sour in a way that surprised guests and delighted those accustomed to more traditional desserts. The recipe required patience, as black walnuts demanded careful cracking, and the vinegar needed months to develop its complex character. Families who tasted this pie remembered it as a treat reserved for holidays or important gatherings, a dessert that told of long preparation and old-world skill. Black walnut vinegar pie endures as a testament to the resourcefulness of Southern grandmothers who knew how to transform humble ingredients into a sophisticated dessert that lingered in memory long after the last slice disappeared. Wood stove corn pone was the quick answer to hunger when daylight faded and work refused to slow. Cornmeal mixed with salt, spring water, and a spoon of rendered fat formed a thick batter spread directly on the hot iron surface of a wood stove. The heat created a crisp crust while the interior stayed moist and hearty, releasing a toasty aroma that filled the room with anticipation. This simple bread needed no yeast or rising time, making it perfect for weary travelers and families returning from long days in the field. A slice eaten plain carried smoky sweetness, while a dab of wild honey or a drizzle of sorghum turned it into a rare treat. Children loved the crunchy edges and cooks loved the speed, proof that a satisfying meal could be made from the humblest ingredients. Modern ovens may produce perfect loaves, but they cannot capture the flavor of corn pone cooked directly on iron heated by crackling wood, a taste tied forever to the rhythm of frontier evenings. Hominy stew, inspired by native and African influences, was a hearty dish that showcased the South's diverse food routes. Made by simmering hominy corn with pork bones, onions, and peppers, it created a filling stew with smoky depth. It resembled pozole from native traditions, adapted by African-American cooks into regional variations. For rural households, it was an economical way to use cheap cuts and corn, stretching ingredients into something both nourishing and flavorful. Families gathered around bowls of it during cold nights, finding comfort in its simplicity. The dish also carried cultural history, reflecting centuries of blending traditions in Southern kitchens. Each spoonful connected communities across time, reminding people of resilience and shared heritage. Though once widespread, hominy stew has largely vanished from modern tables, overshadowed by canned soups and quicker meals. It remains a dish remembered in pockets of the South, where cooks keep old recipes alive. Its story is one of survival, adaptation, and flavor born from necessity. Cabbage and ham hock soup was the kind of dinner that filled both bellies and souls when times were thin and money ran out. The hock, tough and bony but rich with hidden flavor, simmered for hours until the meat fell away and the broth turned smoky. Chopped cabbage leaves, onions, and potatoes joined the pot, soaking up the taste that only slow cooking and patience could bring. The kitchen filled with steam and scent, proof that comfort was brewing even without much to spare. It was not fancy, but it fed families for days and cost next to nothing. In mountain kitchens, the secret was never waste. It was making do and making magic from scraps. The sound of the spoon scraping the pot was the sound of gratitude itself. Every bowl carried the story of thrift and resilience. A steaming ladle served on a cold evening felt like victory over hardship. Even with little meat, the broth was rich, the cabbage sweet, and the memory lasting. Ham hock soup reminded everyone that love and labor make the best seasoning of all. It was humble food, but it held more comfort than gold ever could. Cast iron bannock. Bread offered mountain travelers a quick rustic loaf that required only flour, fat, water, and an open flame. Trappers mixed the ingredients directly in a worn pan, kneading with cold hands until the dough came together in a rough round. They buried the skillet under glowing coals or set it near the fire where heat slowly baked the bread to a golden crust while keeping the inside tender and chewy. The smell of warm grain mingled with pine smoke and damp earth, giving the meal a grounding sense of place. Bannock slices served as breakfast with a smear of wild berry jam, or as the evening side to stewed meat and beans. It held up well for days, making it ideal for long treks when supplies were scarce and every meal had to be reliable. Many travelers swore the bread tasted better with each mile, as the iron absorbed stories of every camp. Modern kitchens rarely recreate that smoky, crackling crust earned only in the heart of the wilderness. Field pea salad was a thrifty dish that made the most of seasonal legumes, mixing fresh field peas with peppers, onions, and vinegar. Served chilled, it was a refreshing side for hot southern summers, often brought to church picnics or family reunions. The tang of vinegar balanced the earthiness of the peas, making it both simple and satisfying. Families appreciated it as a cheap, garden-based dish that stretched across gatherings. Children often picked peas from pods, their small hands helping prepare what would later fill large bowls. Field pea salad was more than just food, it represented the connection between gardens and tables, showing how nothing went to waste. Its bright flavors stood out among heavier southern fare, giving balance to meals. Today, it has slipped from popularity, replaced by mayonnaise-heavy salads and modern sides. Forgotten in many kitchens, its memory lingers in old recipe boxes. Field pea salad was proof that even the humblest ingredients could shine when handled with care. Creekbank smoked eels celebrated the quiet abundance of southern waterways, where families fished for more than just sport. Grandmothers cleaned freshly caught eels, rubbed them with salt and wild herbs, and hung them over smoldering hardwood fires along the creek's edge. Hours of slow smoking transformed the firm flesh into something tender and richly flavored with wood smoke and earth. Served alongside hot cornbread and a simple salad of foraged greens, the eel became a centerpiece that surprised those unfamiliar with its delicate taste. Children learned both fishing skills and respect for the land as they watched the careful preparation. This meal reflected a time when local rivers and creeks provided not only recreation but reliable sustenance. Creekbank smoked eel remains a vivid memory of evenings spent near moving water, when the fading light and curling smoke marked the rhythm of family life and the enduring connection between southern kitchens and the natural world that surrounded them. Soup beans and fatback were more than supper, they were the week's anchor. The pot would simmer all day on the stove, filling the cabin with that smoky, familiar scent of slow-cooked beans and pork fat. Fatback, a cheap cut from the back of a hog, gave those beans their flavor and a bit of grease for strength. In the Appalachian Hills, this was a one-pot wonder that worked hard for families who worked harder. You could ladle it over cornbread, stretch it with onions or greens, and feed everyone until Saturday. There was pride in scraping that pot clean, because it meant you got through another week without wasting a thing. Each scoop was proof that simple food could keep you full and happy without costing much more than time. Some say it tasted like home itself, the kind of comfort no restaurant can serve. Those old soup beans told the story of mountain thrift and heart in every bite. Fried catfish roe was once a prized seasonal delicacy in southern fishing communities, celebrated for its crisp texture and savory flavor. When fishermen brought in catfish, nothing was wasted, and the roe was dredged in cornmeal and fried until golden. It was often served alongside hushpuppies or simple greens, making a meal that felt indulgent despite its humble origins. Families valued it as a rare treat tied to the rhythms of the river, where seasonal catches dictated what appeared on the table. Children grew up with memories of this dish as a reward for long days spent fishing with parents or grandparents. It reflected a time when local waters directly fed households and traditions. Today, fried catfish roe has nearly disappeared, pushed aside by changing tastes and concerns about sourcing. Few restaurants still serve it, and many younger Southerners have never tasted it. Its loss marks a fading link between people and the waterways that once sustained them, leaving it more a memory than a menu item. Squirrel stew was born from the woods, not the market. A family that could bring down a squirrel had meat enough for the pot, and that was reason to be thankful. Dressed, chopped, and simmered with onions, potatoes, and carrots, it became a thick, rich stew that smelled like Sunday comfort. No one thought twice about it. Hunting was just part of living. The flavor was earthy and wild, something that no city meal could imitate. Children learned early that nothing caught went to waste, and every bite carried the story of skill and effort. When times were lean, squirrel stew brought warmth, protein, and pride. It was not fancy, but it was honest and filling, the kind of food that fed both body and spirit. Around the table, folks shared not just supper, but the satisfaction of making something good from the land itself. Wild turkey pot pie turned a successful hunt into a dish of deep comfort on bitter mountain nights. Hunters cleaned the bird carefully, saving every piece of meat and simmering it with carrots, onions, and herbs until the broth grew rich and fragrant. A heavy cast-iron crust of flour, lard, and spring water was rolled thick and laid over the bubbling filling before the pot was set near glowing coals. Slow baking gave the crust a golden sheen while trapping steam inside so the turkey stayed tender and moist. Families gathered around the fire as the scent of roasting meat and pastry drifted through the cold air. Each slice brought warmth and gratitude, a celebration of skill and luck in a land where every meal mattered. Children learned the recipe by watching, knowing that success in the wilderness meant honoring the harvest completely. Modern kitchens rarely attempt such patient cooking, but the memory of wild turkey pot pie remains a testament to frontier hospitality and the enduring pleasure of a meal earned by hand. Scuppernong grape jelly was a staple of homesteads across the South, made from wild, bronze-colored grapes native to the region. Families harvested scuppernongs in late summer, cooking them down with sugar to create a sweet, musky jelly. It was spread thick on biscuits, cornbread, or fresh loaves, bringing the taste of the season into the pantry. Children often helped pick the grapes, staining their hands and lips as they filled baskets. For many, it was less about the jelly itself and more about the ritual of gathering and preserving together. This homemade preserve tied households to the land, with each jar holding the essence of place and memory. Scuppernong jelly was also shared among neighbors, reflecting community bonds built around food. Today, it has become rare, replaced by store-bought jams and the fading of foraging traditions. Its decline marks a quiet loss of self-sufficiency and regional pride. Forgotten on most tables, it remains a sweet symbol of Southern ingenuity and heritage. Cabbage and sausage skillet dinners were the kind that kept a family full without emptying the pantry. Smoked sausage, sliced thin, went into a hot skillet first, its fat sizzling and coating the pan. Then came chopped cabbage and diced potatoes, fried together until soft and browned at the edges. The flavors mingled, smoky and sweet, simple and satisfying. It was the perfect end to a long workday, cooked in one pan and shared straight from it. You could smell it from the porch, and it always brought folks running. The sausage might be cheap, the cabbage humble, but together they made a dinner that felt whole. Hill families loved it for being fast, filling, and made from whatever was left in the kitchen. It was comfort food that never needed explaining, a reminder that good flavor comes from care, not cost. When the skillet was empty, there was always a little left in the heart. Coffee-boiled beef turned the toughest cuts of meat into tender, flavorful dinners using an ingredient always present in a trapper's pack. Hunters browned the beef lightly, then poured in strong black coffee instead of water, letting the liquid work as both tenderizer and flavoring agent. As the meat simmered for hours, the coffee's bitterness mellowed into a deep, smoky richness that mingled with garlic, onions, and a pinch of salt. The result was beef that melted beneath a fork, infused with a subtle roasted taste unlike any ordinary stew. Around the fire, travelers relished the aroma that promised warmth and strength after long days of hauling gear or setting traps. This clever use of a morning staple showed how frontier cooks wasted nothing and found new purposes for familiar supplies. Today, the idea of simmering beef in coffee might surprise modern palates, but for mountain men, it was a trusted method that turned simple camp rations into a meal both satisfying and unexpectedly refined in its layered flavors. Pineapple. Upside-down cake in cast iron was once the ultimate Southern hostess dessert, a showpiece that combined practicality with flair. It was made by layering canned pineapple rings, cherries, and brown sugar in the bottom of a cast iron skillet, then pouring cake batter on top. After baking, the cake was flipped out to reveal a golden caramelized topping that dazzled guests. This dish thrived in the mid-20th century, when canned fruit became widely available and affordable. It quickly became a centerpiece at church suppers, potlucks, and holiday gatherings. Children were enchanted by its bright colors, while adults admired its sweet, buttery flavor. The cast iron skillet made it accessible since nearly every household had one, and it ensured even cooking and a crisp edge. Though it once symbolized Southern hospitality and creativity, it has mostly disappeared from modern tables, overshadowed by convenience desserts. Today, it survives only in nostalgic memory, reminding us of a time when a single cake could capture the joy of a community. Which forgotten hillbilly Christmas dinner would you bring back to your table? Drop it in the comments, hit like if these recipes stirred memories, and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the meals that time forgot.